Welcome back, everyone. We're diving into something pretty wild this time.
Oh, yeah,
It's a story that's kind of like straight out of sci-fi flick.
absolutely.
The claims of this guy, Bob Lazar. He says he worked on actual alien spacecraft, like real deal alien tech.
And what's so fascinating about this deep dive is we've got a ton of material to go through, hours of interviews with Lazar, with journalists who've investigated his claims, even some official documents.
Yeah, so we're not just talking like grainy photos or blurry videos here.
Uh-huh.
There are blueprints, detailed descriptions, even attempts to corroborate this with like official records.
It's a lot to unpack.
It is. So I guess we should start with the basics. Who is
Yeah.
this guy, Bob Lazar, and what's his deal? He says he's got degrees in physics and electronics from MIT and Caltech. Pretty impressive, right?
Yeah, it's true.
Yeah, that's the thing.
There's some mystery around his background. He also claims he worked at Los Alamos National Laboratory in the early 80s. There's actually a phone directory listing and a newspaper clipping that seems to back that up, at least partially.
Really?
But the official records from Los Alamos, they don't seem to show any record of him working there
So already some red flags.
right from the start.
But then it gets even weirder. Lazar claims that he got this super secret government job through, get this, Dr. Edward Teller.
Wow, the father of the hydrogen bomb himself.
Exactly. That just adds a whole other layer to this, don't you think?
Definitely. But to be fair, Teller later denied knowing Lazar in an interview.
Oh, of course he did.
Classic.
Like, the more they deny it, the more suspicious it gets?
Exactly. There was more fuel on the fire.
So what was this super secret job anyway?
Well, according to Lazar, he was hired to work at a place called S4, a hidden facility close to Area 51 in Nevada.
So, like, deep in the desert, hidden away from prying eyes.
Exactly. He says it was part of a program called Project Galileo, the goal of which was to study and reverse engineer, wait for it, alien spacecraft.
Okay, wait a minute. Alien spacecraft. This is where things take a turn into, like, the Twilight Zone.
Definitely. But Lazar, he doesn't just stop there. He describes these crazy security measures at S4. He talks about something called a majestic clearance, which he claims was 38 levels above top secret Q clearance.
Top secret Q clearance.
Yeah, the highest level for civilians.
Wow, 38 levels above that. That's like next level secret squirrel stuff.
Right. He said he was transported in buses with blacked out windows, and there were armed guards everywhere.
Sounds intense.
Oh, it gets wilder. He even says they used intimidation tactics, real psychological warfare to keep everyone in line.
Like a scene out of a spy movie.
Totally.
So let's say, hypothetically, that this S4 facility and Project Galileo, it's all real. What about these alien spacecraft? What do they look like?
Well, Lazar claims he worked on 9 different types of alien spacecraft, each with its own unique shape and design.
9. Seriously.
Yeah, and he even gave them nicknames based on how they look: Top Hat, Sport Model, Jello Mold, things like that.
He gave alien spaceships nicknames. I mean, that's kind of funny, right?
It is, but he goes into a lot of detail about the Sport Model in particular. He claims he actually witnessed a test flight of this craft and described the interior as super minimalist. No right angles, everything seemed fused together, and he said it had this really ominous feeling to it.
So, a very alien aesthetic.
Exactly.
Was there anything inside that, like, made sense to him? Anything that he recognized from a human engineering standpoint?
Yeah, actually, he mentions one specific detail that stuck with him. It was a honeycomb-shaped hatchway.
Interesting. Like, why a honeycomb shape?
He doesn't really say, but it's the one element he understood from an engineering perspective.
So it's like there's this mix of the utterly alien and something strangely familiar.
Makes you think, doesn't it?
It does. Okay, so we've got these mysterious spaceships, but how did they work? How did they fly?
This is where Lazar's explanations get a little complicated.
Go on.
He said these craft use technology based on amplifying and manipulating gravity waves.
Gravity waves.
Yeah, and get this. The power source was supposedly an antimatter reactor fueled by a stable isotope of element 115.
Element 115, what even is that?
Well, it's incredibly rare even in a lab setting. I mean, element 115 wasn't officially synthesized on Earth until 2003,
Seriously.
and even then, it was only in tiny amounts for fractions of a second. So Lazar is saying he was working with this stuff back in the 80s, way before science could even create it.
That's a pretty big claim.
It is.
Okay, so let's back up a bit. This whole gravity wave thing, most people think of gravity as like the force that keeps us on the ground, right?
Right.
But Lazar's talking about something much more complex.
He is. He describes 2 types of gravity: gravity A and gravity B. Gravity A, he says, is what operates on a subatomic level, responsible for the strong nuclear force that holds atoms together. And gravity B is what we experience on a planetary scale, like the gravity that keeps us on Earth.
Okay, I'm following so far. But how does manipulating these different types of gravity, how does that allow a spacecraft to fly?
Well, according to Lazar, these alien craft could amplify and focus gravity waves. Like, imagine warping the fabric of reality, creating a distortion in space-time.
Whoa.
This distortion would allow the craft to basically fall downhill in space-time, essentially bypassing the speed of light limitations.
That sounds like something straight out of, like, Star Trek.
Right, it's mind-bending stuff.
It is.
Yeah.
Did Lazar have any thoughts on why we haven't figured this kind of technology out yet? I mean, if it's possible?
He did. He had this idea of a biological bottleneck in human evolution. He suggested that our biology, like our need for reproduction, emotions, even sleep, it's all holding us back from reaching like a higher level of technological advancement.
Interesting. You're saying that, like, our need to eat and sleep and, make more humans is preventing us from, like, achieving some higher level of scientific
That's
progress.
what he's suggesting.
Yeah. That's a pretty radical idea.
It is. And he even suggests that maybe this explains those gray aliens everyone always talks about.
The ones that look kind of like, big heads and big eyes.
Exactly. He's saying, what if those grays are actually us, but from the future? Like, after we've
Yeah.
overcome this biological bottleneck.
Wait, like, they're time travelers?
That's one interpretation. It's a wild thought, right?
It is. Okay, so we've got these amazing claims about alien tech and spaceships and time travel. But how did Bob Lazar's story become public? I mean, he didn't just, like, walk into a newspaper office,
No,
right?
he didn't. He claims he started by taking some friends out to the Nevada desert to see these test flights.
Like his own little UFO tours?
Pretty much. He had a schedule of when the flights were supposed to happen, and they apparently saw some pretty incredible things.
Wow, what made him decide to, like, go public with all of this?
Well, it seems these little trips attracted some unwanted attention. He started feeling like he was being watched, followed, even threatened. That's when he decided to contact this investigative reporter, George Knapp, who is known for his work on UFOs.
Oh, yeah, I've heard of George Knapp.
So he contacted Knapp, and that's when the famous Dennis interview happened.
Dennis.
Yeah, Lazar used the pseudonym Dennis for a televised interview with Knapp to protect his identity.
Makes sense. So what did he say in this interview?
He laid it all out. His experiences at S4, the alien spacecraft, the propulsion system, everything. He didn't hold back.
I bet that interview caused quite a stir.
It was huge. International news. It made Bob Lazar, well, both a celebrity and a target. Some people calling him a hero for exposing the truth.
Right.
Others said he was a hoaxer or maybe just delusional.
Yeah, I can see how a story like this would polarize people. What about evidence, though? Was there anything to back up Lazar's claims?
That's where things get a little murky. Lazar agreed to take a polygraph test as part of his interview with Knapp.
Oh, interesting. What were the results?
Inconclusive, unfortunately. The polygrapher said Lazar seemed truthful on some parts of the test, but deceptive on others.
So not really helpful then.
Not really.
What about his claims of, like, having those degrees from MIT and Caltech and working at Los Alamos? Couldn't they verify that?
That's where things get even more complicated. Journalists and investigators tried to confirm his background, but some of his educational and employment records were either missing or had been altered.
Wait, missing or altered? Are you suggesting a cover-up?
It's a possibility. Lazar himself claimed that someone was trying to erase his past, make him disappear. He even said that records from the hospital where he was born had been messed with.
That's creepy.
It is. Makes you wonder, doesn't it?
It does. So did anyone try to corroborate any other parts of his story?
They did. Knapp actually tracked down a guy named Mike Thigpen. Lazar claimed Thigpen had worked as a security clearance officer at S4.
No way they found him.
Yep. At first, Thigpen refused to talk about any of it. But eventually, he confirmed to both Knapp and Lazar that he had worked at the base and had done security clearances.
Wow, so they found someone who could actually place Lazar at this top-secret facility.
That was a pretty big deal.
What else did they find out?
Well, Knapp managed to get his hands on a document that supposedly talked about a program to study and reverse engineer alien tech.
An actual document. What did it say?
That's still a mystery, unfortunately. The details are still classified, but the fact that a document like that exists, even if we don't know exactly what it says, it lends some weight to Lazar's claims, right?
It definitely raises some eyebrows.
Yeah.
especially in light of some recent events.
Oh, yeah, I know what you're talking about.
His whole gimbal video thing
Right. The Pentagon officially released that video taken by a Navy pilot a few years ago.
shows this like unidentified aerial phenomenon doing these crazy maneuvers.
Exactly. And Lazar claims that the object in the video moves in a similar way to the sport model he described, flying belly first.
Huh. So we have this declassified video from the Pentagon showing something that seems to defy our laws of physics. And Lazar is saying he worked on similar technology back in the 80s.
It's a pretty interesting connection, to say the least.
It is. This is getting more and more intriguing by the minute. It feels like we're just scratching the surface here.
Oh, we've only just begun.
Where do we even go from here?
I think we need to dig deeper into Lazar's claims about element 115 and what it all means. He didn't just say it was a power source. He suggested some pretty profound ideas about its role in advanced civilizations.
Okay, I'm definitely curious to hear more about that.
We'll get into all that and more right after a quick break.
Okay, so let's get back to this LM-115. It wasn't just some random detail in Lazar's story, right?
No, not at all. It was kind of at the center of his whole theory about advanced civilizations.
Okay, I'm all ears.
Lazar thought that stable element 115 might actually be naturally occurring on other planets.
Wait, so what's like super rare here could be like, I don't know, lying around on some other planet?
That's what he's saying. And if that's the case, then those civilizations could have had access to it and its properties for, who knows, maybe millions of years longer than we have.
Wow, I mean, think about the kind of head start they'd have. It's like we're comparing ourselves to, like, cavemen with sticks and stones.
It's a good analogy. And it kind of ties back to that biological bottleneck idea we were talking about.
Oh, yeah, that we're, like, limited by our need to eat and sleep and stuff.
Exactly. Lazar's suggesting that, maybe these other civilizations have evolved past those limitations.
So, like, no more sleeping or eating, just pure science and exploration.
Maybe. And it made me think, like, what if that's what the gray aliens are?
You mean, like, the ones with the big heads and the big eyes?
Yeah, those guys. What if those are actually humans, but from the future? Like, after we've evolved beyond our current limitations.
Whoa, so you're saying they could be time travelers?
It's a possibility, right?
I mean, it's definitely a wild thought.
Yeah.
But let's be real for a second here. There's no actual proof for any of this, right?
True. We have eyewitness accounts, that document, a possible connection to the gimbal video, but none of that is definitive proof.
Right. It's all circumstantial.
Exactly. And let's face it, some of Lazar's claims are, well, they sound pretty out there.
Yeah, that's fair. So I guess the question is, do we just dismiss him as a hoaxer or, I don't know, someone who just made it all up?
I don't think it's that black and white. I think Lazar's story, even if it's not completely true, it reminds us that there's still so much we don't understand about the universe.
It's like a reminder to stay open to the possibilities.
Exactly, to keep that sense of wonder, to acknowledge that there might be things out there, tech or phenomena or even whole civilizations that are so far beyond what we can even imagine that they just seem impossible.
Yeah, and who knows, maybe someday science will catch up to those ideas.
Maybe we'll find proof of Lazar's claims, or maybe we'll find something even more mind-blowing.
I like that. So let's do a little thought experiment here. Let's pretend, just for a minute, that Bob Lazar is telling the truth. What would that mean for humanity? What would it mean to realize that we're not alone in the universe and that there are civilizations out there with tech that looks like magic to us?
That's a big one. I think the most obvious implication is that we'd have to completely rethink our place in the universe.
Yeah, it's like we've always thought of ourselves as like the most intelligent beings in the universe.
Right. But if Lazar's right, then that's just not true.
It would be humbling, to say the least.
Definitely. It would force us to reevaluate everything, our history, our future, even our understanding of ourselves.
And we'd have to figure out how to interact with these other beings, right? Especially if they have tech that's so far ahead of our own.
Absolutely. And that brings up another point, the potential dangers. If Lazar is right about element 115 and manipulating gravity, we're talking about some seriously powerful tech that could be weaponized.
Oh yeah, that's a scary thought. But couldn't it also be used for good? I mean, think about the possibilities. Clean energy, space travel, maybe even cures for diseases.
It's like opening Pandora's box, right? There's the potential for incredible good and terrible destruction.
So it's like a double-edged sword.
Exactly.
Okay, so we've talked about the implications of Lazar's claims, but what about the guy himself? Do you think he's a genuine whistleblower, or is he just trying to get attention?
That's the million-dollar question. And honestly, I don't think there's an easy answer. There are contradictions in his story, some things that have been debunked, some things that remain unexplained.
Yeah, it's hard to separate fact from fiction.
It is. And the fact that, the government has seemingly tried to discredit him, that just makes things even more confusing.
Hold on, are you saying the government is definitely covering up alien contact?
Not necessarily. There could be other explanations, right? Maybe they're protecting classified information about, like, advanced tech, you
Yeah.
know? Or maybe they're just trying to prevent mass panic.
It's like trying to solve a puzzle, but with half the pieces missing.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. We have these clues, but we don't have the whole picture.
But even if the government has reasons to keep some things secret, shouldn't they be more transparent about what they know? Especially with all the recent stuff like the gimbal video and all those UFO sightings.
You're right. And a lot of people are pushing for more transparency. Scientists, the public, everyone wants answers.
Maybe we're at the beginning of something new. Maybe the truth about all of this is finally going to come out.
That would change everything, wouldn't it?
It would. Okay, so after this deep dive into Bob Lazar's story, what's the most important thing you want people to take away from it?
I think the main thing is stay curious. Keep asking questions. Don't just believe everything you hear, whether it's from the government or the media or even us. Do your own research and come to your own conclusions.
That's great advice. So final thoughts on Bob Lazar and this whole alien tech saga. What should our listeners be thinking about?
Well, we've covered a lot of ground. And I think the biggest takeaway is that Lazar's story, whether it's true or not, it makes us think about some of the most fundamental questions about our existence.
Like, are we alone in the universe? And if not, what does that mean for us?
Exactly. It challenges us to consider the possibility that maybe, just maybe, there's more to reality than we can even imagine.
And that's a pretty powerful thought.
It is.
We've been talking about Bob Lazar and his wild stories about alien tech for a while now.
Yeah, it's been a trip, hasn't it? I mean, his story, even if just some of it's true, it could totally change how we see, well, everything,
It really makes you think, doesn't it? But, we got to be honest here. There are some gaps in his story, some things that just don't quite add up.
Oh, absolutely. We can't ignore that. No hard evidence, no undeniable proof that any of this stuff happened.
So where does that leave us? I mean, do we just write him off as a total phony?
I don't think it's that simple. I think even if we can't say for sure whether Lazar is telling the truth, his story reminds us that there's just so much we don't know about, well, about anything, really.
Like the universe is full of mysteries.
Exactly. And we got to stay open to those possibilities, even the ones that seem crazy.
That sense of wonder.
Yeah, to the idea that there might be things out there, technologies, or I don't know, maybe even entire civilizations that are so beyond what we can even grasp that they just seem impossible.
And maybe, just maybe, someday, science will catch up. And some of those impossible things will start to make sense.
Exactly. Maybe we'll find proof of what Lazar's talking about, or maybe we'll find something even more mind-blowing.
That's an exciting thought. So as we wrap up this deep dive into Bob Lazar and his alien tech, what's the one thing you want people to walk away with?
Stay curious. Don't just take things at face value, whether it's from the government, the news, or even, from us. Look into things for yourself. Draw your own conclusions.
I like that. So, any final thoughts on this whole Bob Lazar saga? What should our listeners be pondering as they go about their day?
Well, I think the biggest thing is that Lazar's story, whether it's true or not, it makes us confront some really huge questions, questions about our place in the universe, about whether we're alone, about the limits of what we think is possible.
And those are questions that have always fascinated people.
Exactly. It's about realizing that there's just so much more out there than we know, so much more to explore and discover.
I think that's a great note to end on. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the world of Bob Lazar and alien technology.
Yeah, it's been fun.
The truth, whatever it is, can be pretty strange, sometimes even stranger than fiction.
No doubt about that.
Thanks for listening, everyone.
See you next time.